my screen and say, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Penny Imison, and I'm the Director for Rocktown History, and I want to welcome you to our 2022 Third Thursday Talk series, and this one is a webinar. So you know that, but for the future, we will be having in-person programming starting next month, and it is our goal to set that up as a hybrid event so you can be at home or in person, and we'll try to accommodate everyone. Last year, we introduced this new format for sharing and discussing our local history, and we've been thrilled with the response. There are about 90 people on the webinar, and I know we do not have 90 chairs in our lecture hall. So I'm hoping you're comfortable in the virtual room. I'm not even sure Chaz could get 90 people in the space he's in this evening. So, oh, well, maybe he'd like to. I would like to introduce this evening's participants. This evening, we will meet two champions for the preservation of local history. And not talking about just filling archival boxes, but sharing that history with the public. Kevin Borg is professor in the Department of History at JMU, where he teaches courses in US history, public history, the history of technology in America, and the automobile in America. He also supervises off-campus history internships, a program which has supported many Rocktown history projects and exhibitions. Kevin has been a member of the Rocktown History Board of Trustees for over 5 years. During that time, he has made himself practically irreplaceable by generously contributing his time and expertise to all areas of the organization. As guest host this evening, Kevin will introduce our special guest, Chaz Haywood. We are recording the webinar tonight, and it will be made available on the Rocktown History YouTube channel, hopefully within the next few days. This evening, we'd love to hear from you. Chaz is quite frustrated that he can't see you or hear you. So, raise your hand, fill the chat box. But when it comes to the Q&A, actually, let's move over to the Q&A if we can. I'll be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A, but we want to make sure that we answer your questions and make sure that you're part of the conversation. So for those of you just joining us, welcome. I am pleased to start our conversation on researching Rockingham's public records by turning the virtual mic over to guest host Kevin Borg.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Really great that so many of you have taken time to come see this event. Again, the virtual makes our end a little weird. I'm a teacher and I love seeing who I'm talking to, and Chaz is a people person too. So bear with us and please communicate with us in any way you can through the system. Is the volume not working on the other end? Are more people having trouble getting the volume up? I'm going to go ahead and carry on, but let us know in the Q&A if others are having a problem with the audio. So it is my great pleasure to be the person to introduce Chaz. He's been a champion and an ally to me since the day I arrived for my position at James Madison University over 20 years ago. And so Chaz himself graduated from JMU with his bachelor's degree in science, bachelor's degree of science in political science, and received his certified clerk of court status from the UVA's Weldon Center in 2012. And he has been serving as clerk of court for more than 15 years. He was elected in 2007. During his over 15 years of service, he has worked diligently to streamline court processes, as well as focused a lot of attention on preserving court records that date back to as early as 1739. Prior to his election, Chaz spent 14 years working for members of the United States Congress, so he knows how government works. He is also employed for a time at James Madison University, as many James Madison University graduates do at some point. He spent 9 years then with the Virginia Army National Guard. He's then served as Virginia Clerk of Courts Association in leadership roles there, as president from 2015 and 2016, legislative co-chair before that, and public relations committee before that. So, and actually continuing to the present in that position as well. He is married to Virginia Burtner of Kieseltown, who he describes in his own text as a cattle rancher and an artist. I think artist would be first and then cattle rancher, but who knows? You know, could be. We'll have to ask Virginia. He has 3 daughters, ages 30, 22, and 18. He's very proud of his 3-year-old grandson Henry, 10-month-old granddaughter Josie, 4-year-old dog Fridley, who we all enjoy seeing at the courthouse when we visit. He's also involved with many organizations that include the Rotary, American Legion, the Harrisonburg Downtown Renaissance, Harrisonburg Rockingham Chamber of Commerce, the Explore More Children's Museum, Harrisonburg Rockingham Boys and Girls Club, and others. He's a member of the Grace Covenant Church in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and somehow manages to find time to be an advocate and a saver of all kinds of history for Rockingham County. Chaz, welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Are we good? Okay. Well, it is great to be here. And, you know, you hear too many things spoken about you. And what it made me just realize as I go back to a belief that I have is that when you get elected, you don't get elected to sit behind a desk. You get elected in any position, no matter what it is, to go out and make everything better around you, however you possibly can. So I do try to do that through a lot of organizations and supporting people who have just helped me get here. I was born in Montana, raised in Idaho. And it's amazing that I'm sitting in a courthouse as the clerk of court in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Many of my old high school friends and such don't tell all those secrets and always give me a hard time because it surprises everybody. But anyway, so I'm real excited to be here. I'm not, like everybody said, I'm not used to not seeing people. I get the energy from seeing people and talking and seeing how we're connecting. So I'm looking over at some of the comments and I'm seeing that San Antonio is here, Bergton is here, Broadway. There's just so many folks here from other states as well. And San Antonio is great because we have a family place in Medina, Texas. So whoever's in San Antonio, make it out to Medina and get some apples. But anyway, so I'm excited to be here tonight to tell you first a little bit about, I always think it's important to tell you what a clerk does. I'm going to share a little bit about that. It's going to be really boring to a lot of you that are here just for the history. But the important thing is day to day, what clerks of court do. There's 120 in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what we do is really today creating the history tomorrow. I was very grateful for my predecessors. Rockingham County was created in 1778. We were originally Augusta County. And I was very grateful that my predecessors kept everything and they kept it tucked away and stacked up nicely in rooms. And when I got here, I got to do something different. And that was figure out a way to make it presentable to each of you. And making it presentable to the public for public research is why I think I'm here, and making sure I really try to do a 5-minute rule, and anything you ask us for, we can hopefully put our fingers on it within 5 minutes. So let me just do a quick little PowerPoint. No one likes those, but we're going to just do a couple things here. I promise it won't be that bad. Okay, can we see that? Great, okay. So if you haven't been to Harrisonburg or Rockingham County, that's our courthouse. This is the 5th courthouse on the site, and it was created in 1896. And we'll talk more about the actual square. I did see somebody who's interested in Harrison, and we'll talk more about the Harrisons and their deed to create the square that you're looking at for the courthouse. I always go back, I go back to why I thought I should serve, and that's just, it's important for me to remember what I did, promises the day one, and that I continue to fulfill those promises. Clerks across the Commonwealth of Virginia, we deal with criminal matters, typically felony and above cases, and misdemeanor appeals. We deal with civil matters, including divorce. We do name changes. This office, we do passports. That's something I choose to do as a way to continue to additionally serve our community as something that's not really out there. Concealed handgun permits, we do the probate. We're getting into some things that really interest historians. So we do probate matters, so all the wills. If you die with a will, that's great. If you die without a will, that's called intestate. And what we will then do is we will go through a process, but those wills, those probate matters, even without a will often have a list of heirs. So as you're seeking family members and others, don't become disheartened because you don't have an actual will. There's a lot of great information that's still out there. Marriages, so marriage licenses and wills we have here in this office, and deeds back to 1778, totally restored and available online, and we'll show you more of that as we go into it. Judgments, assumed names, and restitution. So let's talk some more fun. So a lot of courts over the years, as we talked about, just save their items. They put them in files, they put them on shelves, and attorneys might have access to all the back rooms, and things may not always get back into case files. So when I came here, I really see it as the servant side of what the clerk is supposed to be. So we started putting everything that we can online, organizing the space. And so areas like that are now like that. And so we know what's in that space. That's actually the original wills and marriage bonds in those red books. As we continue to put items onto our court management system and also our land record system, and I'll explain the difference in those in a little bit. We started looking at the number of images. So just recently, as of last February 1st, our number of court records is 4.9 million records on the court side. You'll notice that June stopped on June 1st, and that's because we changed to a new land record system that is the best land record system in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I'll show you more about that here in a little while. But they batch everything, not by pieces of paper. Like a deed may have 30 pages, but they just say that's one. So we're working on some just in the land record side, just in the court side that are searchable by you. I'm always grateful for the Library of Virginia. So clerks around Virginia, we all collect different fees. And one of the amazing fees that we collect is the Library of Virginia. It's called a CCRP. And what that is the conservation funds. Last year, we just announced that $4.7 million was doled out to 101 clerks across the Commonwealth of Virginia. $4.7 million that's going to preserve and conserve a lot of the records like we have done here in Rockingham County in the city of Harrisonburg. So that's amazing. And I don't want to, I'd be remiss to say that I'm a very proud member of the Sons of the American Revolution. The DAR is actually recognizing the Library of Virginia and the Clerks of Virginia for the $4.7 million restoration projects that are getting ready to happen. In my office alone, since I took office, $321,000 has been spent of grant funds just for conservation. And let me add that I'm not running out and creating this money. This is money that's been collected from you. It's been collected from taxpayers who utilize our services. It's been collected for deeds recorded, assumed names recorded, name changes, all these things. So all I do is say, look, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we get your funds back as much as we can. So other rooms, this was a basement room. Many courts have basements tucked nicely away, pieces of paper and books. And again, this is just showing you what that room looks like nowadays. I think for me, I just want you to see what we're doing differently here. So let's talk about some of the online research tools for you. And I'm going to show you our website in just a moment, because I want to walk you through right where things are. So when you go to my website, you'll be able to find it. And then we're going to talk more with Kevin and others as we talk about what was Exploring Rockingham's Past, which was the project when we created and is now the history of the Blue Ridge. And this is a picture we just came across very recently, tucked away inside a book. And this is the local soldiers, local militia preparing to leave for the Spanish-American War. And this is a fantastic picture to me because I'm going to show you the records we have that are associated with this photograph. And so it's again, so many things are tucked away and stories are ready to be told if you just keep looking. So let me get past that. And finally, I just want to show anybody who's local here, this is another just found photograph. And this is the deed room that I'm standing in right now. I'm kind of at the bottom of the picture, standing where that trash can is located. And this included Bob Switzer, who's the gentleman to the far right. and Bob Sutz was the clerk of court at the time. And I always know pictures of Bob. There's 3 or 4 because he always has a cigar or a cigarette in his hand. And if you notice, everywhere you go in many of the old courthouses, there's always ashtrays everywhere, and the rooms are always painted yellow. And we figured out finally that was because of the smoke that used to occur in our deed rooms. So thank you for that. So let me hop back over here real quick, and we will stop sharing that. Take me just a minute. Okay. Are we on the website here? Good. Okay, so if you come to my website, it's rockinghamcountyva.gov/circuit. Everything we do, we try to make sure we have an easy shortcut to it. So /circuit will take you to my main page. On the left-hand side are all the services we provide to the community if you ever want to take a look. Some folks will be interested in the historical courthouse information. And so this gives you just an amazing history of each of the courthouses. And we really thank Dale McAllister, who many of you know, because Dale McAllister was our champion to help us tell those stories of each of the courthouses. So genealogy, as you see on the left-hand side, that is really where most of you who love history are going to want to go. And so we dropped everything history into genealogy. We can rename it, we might, but just so you know it's here. So what this is going to show you is within birth records, we just so happen to have records that were left here, some birth records and death records. They're not the records of the clerk of court. They're a health record, but they were left here. And I'm not giving them up because they're amazing resources for a lot of genealogists out there. Wills, we mentioned, are 1778 to present. And as you go across to the right, it lets you gives you a link to quickly go to where you can view those items in our systems. Minute books are all scanned and imaged, and minute books are the records that are happening in the courtroom. So often the clerk those would be the clerk's records, the minutes of the court. The very first one we have is March 1778. And we have everything imaged in on the system. And if you ever come down to the courthouse, which I'd welcome your visit, you would see those originals are still here as well. Most of those have been preserved, put behind Mylar, but I still find it very important to allow you to hold those original records. I think it brings you a little closer to them. Muster rolls, muster minutes, Civil War veterans records, Virginia militia records. So I'm just going to show you for the fun of it, the Spanish-American War from 1898. So you remember a moment ago when I talked to you about this photograph we recently found, tucked safely away inside another book. And there we go. So this was written by some local folks, and it included synopsises and stories from all the local papers that were talking about the local soldiers and when they were called up, how they were called up, who was leading them. And it goes into the whole story of all the way to Florida. It talks about the morale. It has copies. If you have a relative that was in the Spanish-American War from this area, this will list that individual. It will often talk about who was sick, who stubbed their toe, who was doing well. And it is just such a fascinating piece for those that are interested in the Spanish-American War. Let's see here. Overseers of the poor, we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to exploring Rockingham's past. So right down the left-hand side here, Chancery Records are a project created by the Library of Virginia. It's not the friendliest page right now, but they're working on a huge revamp of that at the Library of Virginia. I'm really excited about this. This will let you search Chancery. And if you aren't familiar with Chancery Records, it's basically kind of our law and civil matters. So individuals between issues between two individuals. So this will let you search almost all of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't think they're all available yet, but I think 90% of them are. And it's a free search. And one of the things that's great about the partnerships we have with JMU and the partnerships that we've had through my office with the Library of Virginia are through them, records are free. For records that you get directly from my office for ongoing matters like marriage licenses, wills, those I'm required by law to charge 50 cents a page for an individual to get a copy of. So the more that we can push out in these partnerships, the better I believe it is for the public, since and until they would allow me to just give all the records away for free. And we'll see if that day ever comes, but I'll keep trying. So that's the Chancery Records. Land grants are a wonderful story. One of the first items that I unfolded when I started to work here was actually a land grant. I'll show you here in a little while. And I wasn't familiar at the time with what vellum was, and I unfolded this thick piece of paper, and I found out it wasn't paper, but it was vellum. It was skin, and it was signed at the bottom by James Monroe, and we'll show you a little more of that. Military records are important to me as a veteran as well. We're getting ready to launch a lot of the World War I records that now can be shown. And minute books, we talked about those just a moment ago. So let's go ahead and hop over to Exploring Rockingham's Past. I won't make you watch the video. Let me get to that. There we go. So I went past the video. If you want to watch it, I'm proud of what we've done here. But what I'd like to do right now is ask Kevin to come back on and maybe start to talk about the process that we used in creating Exploring Rockingham's Past and what is now Histories Along the Blue Ridge.
All right. Chaz, that's a whirlwind tour of an amazing amount of stuff that you have available to researchers. And I am keeping my camera off because I'm in Bridgewater and I'm getting glitchy connection here all of a sudden. So I'm going to kind of ease the pressure on the pipes here and try to do this without you being able to see me. I apologize for that. I'm going to go ahead and, whoops. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share screen because I can't control yours, Chaz. So if you stop sharing yours, yeah, great. And so what I'd like to do here is this. So again, apologies for the PowerPoint kind of thing, but it's useful at times. And so what I would like to say is, I'm getting oriented on my screen here, sorry. Get some of these other windows out of the way. So what we've got here is a PowerPoint that is not working for me. I'm sorry, there you go. So what we've got here is a system that we started a few years back in conjunction with the really, really great people. Other part of this partnership is JMU Libraries and Special Collections and the digital magicians that work at the library. So in the spring of 2018, we unveiled the first Exploring Rockingham's Past project of a graduate student in history who is interested in trying to do a unique digital project, and I steered him to Chaz's office, and it turned into this wonderful relationship that started this whole project. Then we have continued it each year afterwards, trying different methodologies, doing different record sets, and it's grown. So we changed the heading there you see in winter 2020, and then as we started expanding beyond just Rockingham County records, which I'll show you in a moment, we decided it's no longer just Exploring Rockingham's Past, it's actually Histories Along the Blue Ridge, and this is where the new term came in. So if I can get my thing to work again, there we go. So altogether at this point, and it's still growing, we don't have this year's work factored into this, but at the beginning of the fall of this year, we had 17 collections, 14 from Rockingham, 3 from Rappahannock, more from Madison County on the way. Again, PDF files, huge numbers of PDF files, some of them over 100 pages each. So we're looking at a significant amount of records. And Chaz this is part of helping with the same process that Chaz has been doing for years and years and years. And that is to go into a set of records and help to flatten, straighten, and get them in preserved and savable condition. Thankfully, Chaz has done almost all of that now, so most of the time the students don't have to do this part, even though it is extremely important and valuable to them as students. So when we released the first set on the Shenandoah National Park removal records, we had an opening at the Madison Regional Library, and it was widely attended by descendant families and interested community members. And it was the most resounding a confirmation that we were doing good work here. Not necessarily that the work we were doing was good, but that in quality, but that the thing we were doing, the meaning of what we were doing was good and was well received and seemed impactful to the, especially to the families of the descendants who were pushed off the mountain. And that news then spread and it got expanded. And so one of our undergrad alums who went off and got an MA in history and became the historic preservation coordinator for the Piedmont Environmental Council, Christy Kendall, then she had helped coordinate the opening. She then was able to get independent funding outside what JMU was doing or what Chaz was doing and go to the other counties and began bringing those records online. So those community members would come to the JMU libraries, get trained in how to do it, and be set up with the right equipment. And then they go back to their community and they go into their courthouse and organize and digitize all those records. And so that's how this is growing and impacting communities beyond there. The next year I said, well, let's think of something else. So another graduate student, and he got interested in the Prohibition records. And so he got to looking at those and decided to do it. And I then got a small grant to add another graduate student from speech and communication who helped with the digital storytelling on this. And so we'll see on the website where you can go in and get even more interpretation and stories around the Prohibition records. And then this past year, so, well, not this past year, last year, 2019, 2020, the third graduate student wave here came through and did the Overseer of the Poor and the School Commissioner's records. And that included transcription, manual transcriptions. He did an incredible amount of manual transcription of old cursive writing. And so we'll hopefully get a point to see the results of that. At some point, we'll open it up for question and answers. And where we are right now is that another graduate student, so fourth wave of graduate students, so Alice Swain, Karen Liu, and Nara Holdaway have been working on voter registration records. And so those will be online. We don't have a clear date when that's going to be digitally available yet, but it's all going through the pipeline right now. And Veronica Garnett with the Madison County Court Records, I think they are in the process of being uploaded right now. Matt Wingfield down at Augusta County Records is interested in joining. And we're actually even going to begin extending, the library has agreed to extend the sort of scope of what can be in this collection to other non-courthouse records. So Tyler Brinkerhoff, a graduate student, has been working with Penny at Rocktown History, looking at shape note and the shape note culture and the printing and the singing in the Shenandoah Valley, and which transcends the Shenandoah Valley. So those records are going to come into this set as well. So let me pause out of there then. So I thought I would just very quickly show you a couple of things, if you can even hear me. I don't know if I'm even working. Can anybody hear me? Is it still working?
Yes.
Okay, great. I didn't know how my Bridgewater connection was going to work. I'm a little uneasy with it. So I thought I would take a moment and look at a couple of cases. So if you go into the Exploring Rockingham's Past and go into the main page, you'll see a drop-down menu there that goes to stories. And so with Prohibition, this is probably the most fully developed set of stories. In fact, there are multiple stories here. And you may have noticed when I had my camera on, my virtual background was a picture of Frittle's drugstore at night from the 1940s. And the Prohibition Records stories tell of a big raid at Frittle's, and that was supposed to be the sort of linchpin there, but my video is not working as well as it should. So other things that we can show you and things that you can find in these records. So in the criminal court records, there's a intriguing case of here's a defendant charged with felony seduction of a minor, and in the collection. So and these are things you just stumble upon when you're doing this stuff, is our postcards that he had sent to this young woman, girl actually, and he was careful to put a code in what he was writing. And so Kevin Hegg, who works in the library and is our technical guy that helps with all this stuff, he sat down and cracked the code. So I have a decoder if you want the decoder, and you can go into this record set and read the coded messages. Another record that I found really intriguing, again, just taking a stab, just dropping it and going, what is this? And it turns out here we've got a 1900 case of assault and battery. Like, okay, that's interesting, assault and battery. And it turns out it's at the Republican Party assembly, and a big fight breaks out over votes being counted or stolen. And I thought, well, that's I guess history does repeat itself in some ways, at least thematically. So I thought it would be kind of fun to share, is that those are the kinds of things you can find. There's lots of stuff, lots of boring stuff. You have to wade through the boring stuff, just like historians know, and then you find these gems, and it's incredible. So I will put screen share in there, and I think get back to everybody else and what you guys have to ask or talk about, or what Chaz would like to continue with.
Let me add just a couple more things, and maybe we can get into some questions answered. So I would be remiss, my job is here every day to make sure the court system continues to run. And the history part of it, to me, is a treat. It's a treat because anybody who loves history, we can get sucked right into it. But I also know that this history belongs to the people. So I'm grateful for my staff. I have amazing deputy clerks who we get the work done every day, and they make me look good every day. When we started exploring Rockingham, it was passed at the time with a young man named Tristan Nelson, who was he had the vision to get the first level started. So Tristan really is that founder and creator of the first web version piece of research. But then we got into Marianne Mason, who was here, was a graduate student who is now with the Library of Virginia after a couple other great jobs. And we had Craig Schaefer, who did the Prohibition piece. And the Prohibition piece to me was very interesting. So because when with Tristan starting with the Skyline Drive cases that are now all available to be searched on the Blue Ridge page, we had a lot of stories, and my goal with the Skyline Drive cases was really about healing. I'm not from here, I'm not born and raised here, but I had always learned with Beldor Holler on the east side of Rockingham County. I'd always learned about a lot of folks whose families were kicked off the mountain, and that continuous distrust of government. I learned about that. I was actually invited to a couple of their homecomings out there, gatherings at a church in the Holler, and I was told, don't wear a tie, don't carry a clipboard and take notes, and don't tell them you're from the government, Chaz, and you'll be just fine. And but what was great about all these records for Skyline Drive is we were able to provide some healing, because some of those records, they include letters from the families explaining why they don't feel they're getting the proper amount. But then at times we found many others where letters where people were happy, and they were asking for some more because they saw that as an opportunity to get their family off the mountain for maybe a different style of life. So there was an interesting, there were some real interesting finds there. When we then tackled in with Craig Schaefer's work on Prohibition, it was fun because that's when we first started to find these interconnections of Skyline Drive and Prohibition. And we found that there were quite a few individuals who lived up on the mountain who had fruit trees, and they would had some problems with the law because of what they were creating with their fruit trees. So but those are the stories we're trying to tell. Those are the connections we're trying to make for people who are researching their family, because it tells a story, and telling that story for me is the most important part. And then really tying it up this past year, this couple years ago with Kayla Heslin, who was here in the office, and she really, for me, is the home run champ. She really took things to the next level for researchers across the country, across the globe, in building the educational research tools within exploring Rockingham's past. So, and I just have to say, because of them, I always like to carry this around and say, because of them, we got this great award from the Shenandoah Valley Technology Council. And so that again takes the history and things that we are doing here with JMU, and we're using technology, and it's being recognized for that. And I'm so proud of just the teams of folks. So I want to do one other thing. I'm just going to actually tell a story and then questions. So a fantastic part of some of the things that we have in the courthouse are behind me here. And I think what I'll do is actually stop, take questions, and then we'll I think those are going to meld into some of those answers. So who's handling questions?
So one of our guests would like to know, do you know where militia records for the state of Virginia are held? She's looking for 1810 to 1850.
So militia records were typically, so we have some militia records here, but the militia records for that period we have are just local. So really, if you can find out where the folks started, because even our militia records say where they died or where they never came back from. And so I can't really tell you, but if you want to send me a message or email me, I have friends in clerk's offices across the Commonwealth, and I'm happy to help you dig further for those.
And also there's a question about the property tax records post-Civil War. Are those available?
They are. So so if you're likely talking what clerks call land tax books, and we have those here in this courthouse. We have them restored from 1778 through the end of 1800, and those records are fascinating for property tax. A lot of folks started to look through those to find out when a house was built, because if you'll be looking under, let's say, Chaz Haywood, and you'll see that I paid so much taxes in 1870, but suddenly in 1871 my taxes went up, and that is very likely that's when you can determine whether a house was built on the property at that time, which a lot of times people use those property tax forms, if that's what you're talking about. There are other older tax books. Let me grab one. I think I was told you all can hear me if I keep walking and talking. A lot of our tax books were not originally created to be the clerk's record. So for example, this property tax book that's been restored from 1815, we did this in partnership with the local NAACP back in 2012. And this was an interesting tax book. I'm gonna hold it up here. Hopefully you can see some not too much reflection. But this ended up with individuals, and then it would explain how many horses they were taxed on, barns, clocks, cows, and slaves. And so that is a very interesting part of history.
Excellent. Could you give us an update on the burned records, the burned books, and how many of those have been digitized?
So burned books would not be digitized, the originals. All the others are completely on my website. They have been scanned and imaged. So if you don't know, in October 1864, for those that don't know the history, that was the time of the burning. The Northern troops were coming down to the valley and burning barns, and because this was the breadbasket of the Confederacy, burning courthouses. As an Army guy, I thought that's pretty brilliant. First I heard about it, I thought why, and then I realized it's pretty brilliant to remove all history of who owns property. I mean, can you imagine suddenly saying, that's the corner of my property, and somebody else saying, no, I had that creek on my property. So the chaos that burning records could provide. So in October 1864, the judge here at that time, Judge Allen, said, let's go hide all of our books east in the Blue Ridge. And the wagon, there's a couple stories, but the wagon either broke a wheel or got stuck in the mud. And that happened in Grottoes, Virginia. There's a large home right in the middle of Grottoes, Virginia, that was there even then. And then it was the only home. And the Union troops didn't come and burn this courthouse at all, or the previous courthouse at that time, but the Union troops did pass our wagon where we presented, and all our books were presented, and they lit the wagon on fire. The story goes on to tell the fact that as the Union troops passed, a young lady came off the porch that was living in that house, left her children on the porch, came off the porch and used wet grass and wet straw and put out the fire on those books, and move those books into the basement of that home, which I was in this past year. We're going to be talking more about that in the coming year. And that young lady's name was Mary Kiesel, which was of Kieseltown, Kiesels. And her, if you're from this area, and if you ever go over near the Cross Keys Cemetery, Mary's gravestone is in there. We had it restored this past year, just as kind of a surprise of this announcement we're going to be coming out with. So the burnt books were all rewritten because they were found to be a shame, is what the newspaper called it, a shame that those records, embarrassing as it was, are sitting on the floor in the courthouse. So they were all rewritten, and we have an entire section called the burnt deed books. But there are about 8-9 actual burnt books left, and we have those on display here, tucked away safely. We have them in Rocktown History Museum in Dayton, which you have to go by and see, and a couple other historical places. We're pleased with those.
Thank you. Okay, let's see what else has come in. Here is a note from an extraordinary genealogist who says some property tax records from the mid-1800s are available on FamilySearch.com. So that would be available to you in your homes or at the Rocktown History Library. Are there existing records that would allow for the tracking of the use of eminent domain or other acquisitions by railroads in the county?
So all the deeds, we've had some situations come up in Rockingham County, some civil cases that are actually dealing with railroads even today, because when the railroads were put in, it's for the betterment, and we had crossings. So I don't think I can answer that, but what I can tell you, there are ongoing struggles with the railroads, because as new rails have been along the 340 area, as new rail has been put down, the crossings for people's homes have been taken away. So there have been some legal struggles between the rail and some local folks out there. But as far as eminent domain, case by case, you can see things with the railroad going in, and that's almost all of those are available in our public search in the deed room. But you would have to really dig into who owned the property at the time and maybe when the railroad came through.
All right, now here's another older one. Are the records from what is now Pendleton County, West Virginia, stored in Rockingham County? Since
they are not. They are not. So I'm not sure who would have handled those. Someone has asked me for that before, and I don't have an answer to that. I'm sorry, but I have not seen anything that lists anything that is not the current Commonwealth of Virginia.
Interesting.
That's a great question, though. Wonder where they are.
What happened? What happened to the Pendleton, Virginia records? Do you know the record set that historian C.E. May used for his work on Black history in the Valley? They would have dated before the 1850s and contained emancipation records, court summons, and involving Black County residents.
So we are just now getting into some of the records that involved more individuals of color. We do have, there was a great JMU professor, Dorothy, I always get it wrong, Dorothy Bragg-Brigg, Dorothy.
Boyd Bragg.
Yes, thank you. I get it backwards. And when I first came in, as we were finding pieces of the Register of the Free Negro, which actually is older than that, but that is, let me grab it. I figured a lot of these things would come up, and it's important for us to share. So this is the Register of the Free Negro from 1807 to 1859. So these are the records where an individual would bring in their certificate of freedom, and they would be dictated. It would be noted in this book by the clerk who it was. For instance, this one has number 157, Rockingham County, registered in my office this 4th day of February, 1832, Augustine. Now a Black man of 22 or 23 years of age, about 5 feet. So So this record is fascinating when you deal with individuals of color because of what it is historically. We are also getting into the military records, which have many individuals, of course, listed by color. We also have currently going in all of the electoral records, the voter records, which are broken into white, male, white, female, and colored. But for those other records that you're mentioning, you'd have to give me more defining things to dig deeper. but because we can put our hands on anything now, usually by topic. But I don't separate things by topic based upon race. I still keep everything as it should, in what I believe should be, which is these are the election records, these are the voter records, and this is how those voter records were handled at the time. And I think that's an important part of it. We don't restore just a piece of any record. How we restore an entire section, and then someone can tell that story.
Nice. There are some commenters who are answering the question about Pendleton County.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
so for people interested in that, I would recommend you look at the chat. There seem to be several answers. So Library of Virginia being transferred to the new courthouse, perhaps Augusta County.
You know, Augusta County folks, as you travel, because this isn't just about Rockingham County, but as you seek out the treasures in Augusta County and others, Augusta County, the new clerk that in the last few years, Steve Landis, they've been up here and they're doing amazing work down in Augusta County. I was excited to do a program with Steve recently, and one of the things that he pointed out is he had a deed, and when I looked at this deed, it had symbols and images, and they were from the tribal leaders that were deeding over property to create the city of Pittsburgh. So that tells you amazingly how big Augusta County was. It went up around Lake Erie. So Augusta County, I think our 1778 creation and our oldest record 1739, but I think we have a lot. And then Steve Landis, I think, is going to be the rock star in the coming decade as they uncover the treasures of Augusta County.
That's great, because we've just had a question about the burnt to deed indices and why does Augusta not make them available? So maybe that's coming.
I'm sure it is. They're being very careful as they go through and organize. Just like me, I didn't immediately put everything out there. What I did is I went through and found out, what do you have? What we have here, because the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Library of Virginia is given the authority by the General Assembly to create a retention schedule. And it says what a clerk keeps and what a clerk doesn't keep. Anything prior to 1913, we keep. After that, most things have a schedule, whether 20 years, 10 years, 40 years, or forever. So part of what they were doing down there, I know, is going through to make sure that what they have are only things they're legally supposed to have after 1913. And then starting to define and organize and figure out what they have and how they're now going to start putting those things out there.
Okay. So here,
but I'd love to advocate with you. I'd be happy if you want to send me a note, and I'll do what I can to help as well, because I know Steve wants to get it out there.
Here is a specific question. Would there be a trial transcript for the slaves who were tried for the murder of my ancestor, John Harrison, in 1786?
1786. So we can look some things up, but transcripts are not typically anything that was kept. Records, court cases typically entailed the permanent record being the order of being what the judge or jury decided at that time. It didn't go beyond every case that I've seen. I can't think of any that really got that deep into the full cases anymore after 100 or 200 years. We weren't so fortunate to find full cases. So likely no, but if you want to send some of that information to me, we can dig a little bit and see what we can find.
Great.
And I'm sorry I'm saying send me things, but sometimes I want to make sure I dig and give you a good answer, not say, sure, we have that. Publicly, I'm not sure if we do. And I want to be honest with you.
I saw that in the chat, and I did a quick search on the criminal records that are in the Exploring Rockingham's Past, and there's too many hits to be able to tell if any of them, and you'd have to sort of plow in. So if you had the defendant's name, right, having the victim's name doesn't always work in the titles. Unless
the entire case has been gone through and indexed by every name in the case, he's right. The metadata and everything that people put in is going to typically involve just the defendant's name. That's how things were indexed.
Okay.
And searching's fun. I would tell you, I was sitting at a family gathering 2 Sundays ago, and some of the older fellows of my wife's family said, hey, we want to search for some where our family is and all these records you have, Chaz. So they started digging through and came back in, and I said, well, give me a name of one of the oldest relatives. And they gave me the name of Minnie Marshall. So I hopped on. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to have some fun here. Dun, dun, dun. Share. So let's go back over here real quick so you can see a couple things. So if you were looking for any of the collections, you could browse by item, by finding age, which gives you some more direction on what the items are. You can go into the actual exhibits, or if you just want a global search, go right up here and type in any name you want. So I typed in Minnie Marshall and search, and sure, and this was I think the third grade grandmother of them. So I started looking through and I said, oh, guess what? Your great grandmother was a defendant dealing with the misdemeanor sale of alcohol and ardent spirits. And so it was fun. We actually got into the actual case file where Minnie Marshall was found turning over a bottle containing ardent spirits out of sheer fright. And so again, take your time and start searching through those. And I'd be remiss if I didn't take you quickly back to my website and take you to the Land Records Division and Secure Remote Access. So this is where you get in to see all of my land record side, which is, let me click on here. So this shows you everything that's in here. Real estate, our current records are 1942, but historical ones are in here as well. Our judgments, so these are mostly for legal searches, wills back to we have some 1774. So this will tell you and let you search within each of these areas. We do something very different. And what we do with our land record system, why I told you earlier, I really feel it is the best. And that is because we give you an opportunity to search our indexes at no charge. That means you can hop on and you can search any name you want, and it'll tell you whether or not it's here before you pay for anything. And to me, that's really important. I don't want you to pay just to find out, oh, darn it, we just spent all that money and our records must be down in Augusta County. We also offer, if you see over here, most offices charge $50 a month. I charge $26, but I'm not looking to make money off taxpayers, but what I do is I use, this is gauged and changes based upon how much this system costs the taxpayers of Rockingham County every year. And we just cover exactly what the cost is for the system. So I'm pretty proud of that. The users of this system are actually paying for the system. And let me just log in right here. How do I move you? So if you become a paid user or log in, you would see this. And for instance, I'm going to do a document search. And let's just go ahead and go down to marriage. Penny, do you have a name of anyone that maybe has had, or somebody throw a name in the chats that guarantees that their great grandparents in Rockingham County got married here? Somebody give me a name. I don't see the chat, so Penny, you may have to read it to me.
I see the name Henry Switzer.
Oh, Switzer. By any chance, was that individual related to Bob Switzer? So what our system does, it's intuitive. As I typed in Switzer, you see all these names popped up, and these are actual names that we have saved that have been indexed in the system. It doesn't mean they're within wills. It doesn't mean they're within marriage, but these names are in there, and sometimes records have been sealed for the newer records. So did we say Henry?
Henry.
So let's see what Henry did here. I'm not looking to use Switzer in any other way, so I'll just use the Henry. We'll just keep that nice and clear. So here's a marriage license, for instance, from 1842. So let's look right down here at the corner and click view. And what's great about this, folks, is this is actually a bond. This is a marriage bond. And if I zoom in, does it zoom in for you all? No. Okay. So this will go in. So 1842, this shows that Henry Switzer, and so I should have worn my bifocals, but this gives you a much better idea. So Henry Switzer, and it looks like maybe Deanna Fry, daughter of Simon Fry. So I just wanted to show you how easy it is to find this. So what I would do with this if I was doing research, obviously, is hop onto Simon Fry and then work my way down, work my way into the next level of marriage licenses. Let me back up here. And just curious, let's do Fry. There's a Simeon, maybe that was it. Let's take a look at Simeon. These are these rabbit holes that I go down. So here's Simeon and Mary. That's probably about right age time. So here we are into 1810, and the person who asked for this can gauge whether or not Simeon was probably the person. So it looks like they're Simeon Fry and Alexander, maybe Kinsey. But anyway, so that shows you how easy our record systems are. By providing this intuitive search, I can now also say, add another name up here, I'll click right there. I can add another name, maybe Abraham Fry. So you can just keep adding names and searching document types, whether it's wills, marriage licenses, deeds. And if you say, well, that's not my Abraham, you can take it off and do a further search. So go back to that.
That's excellent. And that actually is a nice segue into the overseers of the poor data that somebody is curious about. Could you talk more about that? And I'm going
to defer to Kevin. Kevin has,
okay.
I'm familiar with it. Kevin would be the right one on this one.
What is the specific, just more information about what the overseers of the poor records are, or are you looking for?
Can you tell us more about the overseers of the poor data?
Yeah, so overseers of the poor is the records of how poverty was handled in Rockingham County, and it's a traditional system, and generally comes over from European precedent, that you care for the poor in your community within your own community's resources. And so a board would be assembled that would have the annual responsibility when somebody brings a case to them or a case approaches them in need of support and help. Then they would evaluate, and as you can imagine, in the 19th century, even the late 18th century into the 19th century, that people who are impoverished are looked at carefully as to why they're impoverished, and the question is always whether they're deserving poor or not. You don't want to, the sense was not to accommodate somebody who was just being lazy, and so people who were down on their luck then were then provided for. Sometimes they were given some amount of financial support. Oftentimes, there were situations where it's somebody who was relatively young and needed some way to make a living, and so they would be provided an internship, so an apprenticeship. So they would be granted, so they would approach somebody, a tradesperson, a farmer, somebody in Harrisonburg, Rockingham County, who would be willing to take on an apprentice to teach them the trade, to bring them up to the point where they could become independent of needing help like that. That often would work for particularly white male and female, young white male and females, as there would be a place for them to do that kind of work, for them to become independent. So we saw a lot of those. The graduate student who went through these noticed a general pattern that those kinds of opportunities were available pretty readily to white young citizens in need, and that African-American citizens in need, young citizens, would be indentured as a servant. It was often described as being a servant rather than to a specific trade. Some were petitioned to trades, particularly if there was an African-American tradesperson who would take them on and had room and could afford that. So that's what the overseer of the poor often, to me, that's the interesting part that stuck with me of her research. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Yes. One more question. Is there any chance that the early minute or order books will be indexed?
The early minute books, was that the question?
Minute books, order books.
We'd love to have that done. And I'm actually working the Library of Virginia. I just learned a month ago when I had a visit down there that they have a program by which we can put images up and individuals can go through. It's kind of a public transcription service. So individuals, like maybe some of the folks that are on here, I can volunteer their time to go on and actually offer transcription services. So hopefully, therefore, by transcribing them, they become searchable documents. So we're going to be starting to look at that because, like you, they tell an amazing story, and we all know it. We just have to get it out. So I think that's probably, you're going to be seeing more of that in the next handful of years, no doubt about it, because we're ready for it. But let me unplug here. Let me take you on a little ride with me, because I wanted to show you earlier. Somebody was asking about the burnt deed books. So let me turn you down here. So this is actually one of the original burnt deed books. You can see it's burned along the edges. When these were rewritten to the burnt deed books volumes, where they were retranscribed, where those curves of the fire occurred, you will often see dash, 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 because that part of the book was gone. So as they rewrote them, dashes would be included where there's fire. So that's a great piece. Somebody earlier said that they're doing the research on Thomas Harrison. And that was way back at the beginning. What's really exciting is several years ago, as we were going, I'm sorry about the light, as we were going through a lot of the original deeds, we came across this document here, which you can see on my website. And it's actually, this is the document, this is the deed signed by Thomas Harrison and his wife, Sarah, that actually created Court Square. And we've done this, I'm going to take this off here. We've done this in a two-sided frame. So all of the document can actually be read. And so those of you that are around Harrisonburg, around Court Square, here's a great challenge for you. There are 4 markers around Court Square, not necessarily on the square, but within the city of downtown, in the concrete, that actually are markers for the 4 corners of this deed. During the last couple of years, we worked in partnership with the city of Harrisonburg and their survey crews and the county, and we made sure that those were they'd been moved a little bit as different stores and businesses had been purchased, and we made sure they're in the right spot. So if you ever want a fun little excursion, get the kids, grandkids, or just have fun yourself and walk around and find those 4 markers on the ground. The other thing I wanted to kind of share with you is another great find that I felt we have is actually the original order that created Rockingham County and this court that was signed by Patrick Henry in March 1778. What's interesting is that it doesn't have a signature. It had been cut out. And what is my understanding of that story is there were a couple sisters many years ago that traveled the Commonwealth, and they cut out signatures because it wasn't defacing property as was seen back at that time. That was not seen defacing the actual document, excuse me. So they just took signatures. So that's just I just wanted to share with you quickly a few of the pieces that we have sitting here in the deed room for tonight's discussion.
That's awesome. We're all going to geek out. Let's see if we have one more question. Someone who is trying to find out when their ancestor died would like to know if they can find when his Civil War pension ceased to be paid.
Yeah, so we are actually we have the pension records now separated. And so they haven't been indexed, but we have them all carefully flat filed and mended and in separate boxes now. So those pension records will probably be part of one of the next couple of years with the military records because they all are part of that whole story of between our Spanish-American War, our World War II, Korea, Vietnam. We can't go that close, but because of sensitive information of individuals that are still alive. But certainly those pension records will be in that not exploring Rockingham's past, the histories of the Blue Ridge page. But if you'd like to send me a separate note, I would love to dig. I'll put it on, and I come in every once in a while. My wife lets me come in on a good, and stay a little bit late, and I'll do some digging for you. Be happy to do that.
Okay, you heard it here. I think
it is so great that we have a history geek in charge of the clerk of court. This is terrific.
we had some high school students that were history, not gifted history, but the history honors. Excuse me, I was never in any of those classes in high school. But these kids were so much fun because they loved the documents that we have, and they loved the story was told. And I wasn't like that when I was their age, but I became like that when I went to JMU, and then later many years when I came down here. So again, for those of you that are around here, remember, this is your courthouse. Thank you for letting me hang out here. This is your history, and come on down anytime. Our deed room is open to the public. We have public access stations let me do this. We have public access stations all throughout the courtrooms here. We've got some over there. And we even have two different access points for the Library of Virginia Chancery Records. If you don't want to do that at home, you can sit here and do that as well. And I always have at least a couple of deputy clerks that are just on standby, and we'll help you when we can. We can't do all the research for you, but we can keep putting the tools in your hands and maybe giving you some more ideas.
okay.
There's a question that's come up about what is archived at JMU, and I just want to. There is a ton of stuff at JMU, but none of the records from the courthouse are at JMU. The actual records remain in the courthouse. JMU houses the digital versions of those that have been added to the histories along the Blue Ridge project. And so the Omeka site, the database of the digital, is being housed virtually by JMU, but JMU does not have possession of any of those records. JMU has its own stuff, its own special collections, which also has a bunch of local stuff, but all of Chaz's records are still Chaz's. They're still the county's. They're still the public's.
All the Rockingham records are either here or located in the cool sub-basement of the Library of Virginia. I do try to keep everything here that I can, but sometimes when we have duplicate records, like the Registry of the Free Negro, the actual certificates that people brought in, we have images of those here, but I've chosen to store those originals at the Library of Virginia, and I do that because they're really two records of the same. They may look different, but they're two records of the same. And I do feel by separating those, if something happens in one place or the other, we've still maintained one of the originals. If something goes wrong in Richmond and something goes wrong in Harrisonburg at the same time, there's probably a much bigger thing happening, and we may not be too concerned about our records anymore. I will add real quick, most records I brought back from the library, roads and bridges records are something we'll get into in the future, and that's discussion of why our roads were created, our bridges are created, who asked for the roads to be created within communities, and who built the roads, who was paid for building the bridges. So that's a fascinating one. One record I did take, and people have asked me for it before, one record that they've asked about are some of our health records. Health records in particular are the book called the Inebriate, I want to get it right, Inebriate Epileptic and Feeble-Minded Persons. And that was record that dealt with individuals that had mental health problems that were often put in state hospitals. I don't keep that here. I don't believe it should be a public record. It is, but I've left it at the Library of Virginia because I think in today's market with companies and others out there that you might be trying to get insurance from, I just feel things like that are not something that I want to make readily available. And if I'm wrong, I'm welcome to hear your reason why I'm wrong, but I just don't think that you're in any of your family's mental health records 2 generations ago should be laid out for public inspection. Hope that's okay.
One last question. Do you offer internships to college students?
So I don't offer internships, but what I do offer is opportunities to work here. Anybody who comes in here as college students, they're paid to be here. I look at it as a very important job that they're doing. I don't. Volunteering is great, but but there's a different level of work and accountability, I think, and pride. Hopefully, people take when they're earning something. So at the same time, if they're not doing well, we fire them. And so it's real world. Everything we try to do with college students here is real world. And but I do, if anybody is interested, college students, first, my priority is the students through JMU, through our collaboration there. But I do have others that I have come in and work on back scanning and imaging a lot of the original criminal, our newer criminal cases and others. And it gives them also an opportunity to understand what's done in the court daily.
Okay, well, I'm seeing lots of nice appreciative comments. I don't see any new questions coming in, but lots of thank yous. So I want to thank everybody for being here this evening. If you appreciated the program, I invite you, let's see my screen, to like, follow, and share the Rocktown History Facebook and Instagram accounts, where you will find smaller history tidbits on a more regular basis. Please mark your calendar for next month's Third Thursday Talk, when Dale Harder will share a dash of history and a splash of romance as he discusses the Civil War through the eyes of Emma Lyon Bryan. As I mentioned, this will be an in-person program, but we have high hopes that we will be able to share it virtually in real time, so stay tuned for those details. We have always been pleased to offer our free Third Thursday Talks, well, as a free offer, but please help us keep them free by joining or donating under the Connect tab on the rocktownhistory.org website. And at the bottom of the website, you can sign up for our e-blast news and notes, so you can stay in tune with the upcoming events and get some more history. I'm thinking maybe whoever signs up this evening can get a special decoder. Would that be a good little gift with purchase? Or maybe a copy of the Harrison deed? Are those available, Chaz?
I will work that out for you, but let me offer you something, because I believe in what you all do at Rocktown History. So what I would like to do tonight is maybe challenge your members, and nobody's here, everybody supports history, and you don't have to give, but what I would like to do is for the first, I'll match the first $250 worth of donations to Rocktown History this evening.
My goodness, well, thank you so much.
So start giving, folks.
Awesome, thank you very much. Tomorrow you should receive an email regarding the recording. And please let me know what your ideas for other topics and speakers might be. And thank you for joining the conversation. Stay curious and support your local history.